This is one of many chapters about a man from New Hampshire. He goes by Dean, living as a contractor, just him and his daughter. Money's always a factor, but he grew close with Rachel when her mother died of cancer. She was hitting the books, trying to get a CN, and working full time to help pops with the rent. Social as it gets, she was always making friends. She was only 19 but didn't follow the trends. She had ambitions and visions of running a clinic, until one day she met a guy named Vincent. She didn't tell dad, just grew more distant, like she changed in an instant and started acting different. Ignorance is bliss, but he wasn't ignorant. It just wasn't his place to be getting into it. See, Dean ain't stupid, but his daughter was his life, and it just wasn't worth it to stir up a fight. Besides, he was in love once, knows what it's like, so he decides to step aside and swallow his pride. Till months went by, and they hardly said a word. She started losing weight, looking sick and disturbed. Dean was growing concerned and asked to be heard, but all she had to say was to stay away from her. Turns away, head shakes, says I'll be back in a bit. In a desperate attempt, he grabs her wrist. A pivotal moment, one he'll never forget. Her body pivots, arm flips, and he loses his grip. But in that split second, he catches a glimpse, and then the tone of the exchange started to change quick. Our fate's predetermined, or something we shape. You think the afterlife is a form of escape? Is it wrong to be afraid of what might await? Your one last breath, what would you say? When people pass away, where do they go? Do you believe in heaven? Do you believe in souls? What about demons? You believe in those? As for me, I believe that you reap what you sow. Dean started to tremble and everything became grim as he stood there, stared at a product of sin. A railroad, track marks run up her upper limbs, and bruises from the poison breaking the skin. It ain't what it looked like. She tried to convince him, but his head was spinning, wasn't ready to listen. Anger, adrenaline started kicking in as a good man gives in to demons within. He called her a fiend, and he called her a whore. Backhanded her clean, and then he showed her the door. Told her father she's sorry, tears hitting the floor. Runs to her car, drives through the downpour. But Dean wasn't done, he still wanted some more. Him and this boy Vince had to settle a score. Reached into a drawer with an old 44. Hands a little shaky, never used it before. But you don't gotta be a soldier to prepare for war, and you ain't gotta be a warrior to pick up a sword. Didn't know what was in store or what to expect, cause truth be told, he ain't met him yet. But he failed to detect, or he chose to neglect, the cause and effect of his head being foggy. Reach for his car keys, then he head for the door, following Rachel through the downpour. Our fate's predetermined, or something we shape. You think the afterlife is a form of escape? Is it wrong to be afraid of what might await? Your one last breath, what would you say? When people pass away, where do they go? Do you believe in heaven? Do you believe in souls? What about demons? You believe in those? As for me, I believe that you reap what you sow. So we followed her trail into the night, with no real direction, just chasing taillights, losing track of time as the minutes slide by. Then finally her ride pulls to the side. He kills his high beams, lets the seat recline as he watches his daughter slowly step inside. She stared at Vince, tears flooded her eyes, a needle in her arm, becoming tranquilized. She tries to loosen up and takes a deep breath, overwhelmed with thoughts of regrets and what ifs. Iodine on her chest, Vince tells her what's next as he grabs his collection of surgical instruments. Meanwhile, Dean had been left in the dark, both symbolic and literal. As he sat in his car, he began to relax, thinking he took it too far. Inhales the chemtrails coming off his cigar. He fired up his engine, cause who was he kidding? But then he heard the sirens off in the distance. He decided to wait and give it a minute as he witnessed the ambulance pull into Vince's. Stricken with horror, he tries to keep it together as he watches his daughter come out on a stretcher. He wanted to help her, but he wanted revenge. It was the devil inside him that would win in the end. He knew as soon as they left, it had to be done. A man-possessed hand gripping his gun. A 40-year-old Vince tried to catch his breath as a 44 slammed straight into his chest. Dean stood over Vince and stared in his eyes. His breathing was shallow, he was barely alive. A sigh of relief as he watches him die. But something wasn't right, he could feel it inside. Reached into his pockets without any regard, pulled out his wallet, cash, and a business card. But what he saw next had caught him off guard. He was holding a ledger for a Dr. Bernard. Cold sweats as he stood there in silence, because his daughter Rachel was one of his clients. Didn't want to believe it, he tried to deny it. Chemotherapist written on his medical license. He stepped back and collapsed, immersed in flashbacks, Rachel's weight loss and the needle tracks. In school for nursing and met Vince in class. It seems his wife's cancer was making its comeback. He dashed to the car, gave the engine some juice. At the hospital, they break him the news. She was in a coma that her doctor induced for the cancerous tumor Vince tried to remove. Reminiscing as he walks in her room and watches her life pump through breathing tubes. Kisses her on the cheek, right where he had bruised. The murder plus his daughter, only one thing to do. Rachel was angel, cancer spread till it's fatal. Staring at the cable, running under the table. She was only 19, she was only 19. Dean leans over, unplugs the machine, untucks the gun that he tucked in his jeans. A bullet shell through his temple leaves another crime scene. The yells and the screams and the parts in between. You think you know it all, but you don't really know a thing. Cause you should've known, things are never what they seem. You should've fucking known, tragedies come in threes. A domino effect, a chain reaction. But I wonder if my words speak louder than actions. Cause you wanna know the funny part about rapping? That no one believes me, that this actually happened. But my girl and I noticed when Vince had passed. Cause she had cancer too, it was developing fast. We were pressed on cash. Vincent Bernard, the only doctor we found, even calling us back. Her and I just sat with our hands in our laps, praying to gods that never answered us back. Promised her I wouldn't cry, she promised to fight. One man's greed will be the reason she dies. My fingertips slide through her hair. I stare in her eyes and then I say my final goodbyes. And I'll always remember that rainy day in September. How could I forget not being able to help her? Now I'm distant and sheltered and keep to my own. Uncensored, just a man, afraid and alone. They say the grave is a place far away from home. So I had her last words engraved on her gravestone. Was she freed though? When she died of cancer? Ask a past soul, their silence is your answer. Was her fate predetermined or can people be saved? The only thing after life are the choices we make. It's okay to be afraid, but decide what you'll say. Your one last breath, don't let it go to waste. Cause when people pass away, I don't know where they go. And I gave up on heaven after seeing Dean's soul. But demons, I've seen them, so I believe in those. And the last word she ever said, where you reap what you sow.